Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host DD and joining me once again today is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be reviewing the French GP. So, let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant. I didn't think I would be saying this, but what a weekend in France. Going in, we had low expectations. I was I was preparing for a really boring race, but you have to give it. It was unexpected, beyond our expectations, and I thoroughly enjoyed the race this past weekend at Circuit Paul Ricard. What were your thoughts on the race?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it was a very entertaining and exciting race, especially given towards the end of Max Verstappen catching Lewis Hamilton after making a two-stopper work. So that was pretty exciting. And obviously, it was not the best Formula One race. It was not the, you know, anything extraordinary in that regard. But it was way better, way better than what anyone expected from the French Grand Prix. So that was nice. And it was also the
Yep.
only 10th ever Formula One race where every driver finished. So that was another example of how competitive this race was across the grid.
Absolutely. I don't know if I agree with you that it wasn't the best Formula One race we would have expected. I think it was a great example of what a what a good Formula One race should look like every weekend. There weren't a lot of crazy storylines. It wasn't like Baku where it was like a really slow race throughout and then it went berserk towards the end. It was interesting from the very first turn, from the very first lap till the not the very last lap, but uh, till the penultimate lap, and it kept everyone engaged throughout. So I really loved it, and a lot of in small storylines coming out of the race, especially with the way Red Bull played their strategy, similar to how Mercedes beat them in Barcelona. Red Bull come to France and beat them at their own game, and then also the storyline about Valtteri and Lewis, swapping chassis and people expecting Valtteri to be faster outright, or some people just saying that Valtteri just doesn't have the pace after the fact that Valtteri couldn't outqualify Lewis this weekend. So a lot of interesting storylines coming out of there, and also the flexing controversy. The flexing rules were enforced this weekend, but it didn't seem like it affected Red Bull at all. They still qualified P1 and they finished P1.
Yeah.
And unlike we expected, Red Bull extended their championship lead in the constructors championship. Max Verstappen extended his lead in the drivers championship, but going into the weekend we were like, all right, this is the Grand Prix, this is the triple header where Mercedes come back and they claw back some of those points in the constructors and drivers championship, but things not going the way we expected them to, and I couldn't be happier. You just don't know what's gonna happen, and there's so many other little storylines that we didn't see coming going into the weekend. So let's dive right into it. Let's talk about Mercedes, especially Valtteri Bottas. What are your thoughts after listening to Valtteri Bottas's radio message to his team towards the end of the Grand Prix when Perez was overtaking him?
I mean, see, we know what Valtteri's role in the team is, and I think they did not make him do a two-stopper solely because of that role. No one was doing a two-stopper, and when Max pitted, that suddenly became an option. But they needed Valtteri behind Lewis to stop Max from overtaking Lewis. So I think that's the decision that they took. Obviously, there are many other factors, and if you ask a Mercedes team member, they won't say it directly, but I think the base of that decision was certainly this.
Yeah, absolutely. And when Bottas was defending from, charging Max Verstappen, it didn't seem like he could do much to stop him anyway, He was defending, air for a little bit, and then he logged up and went wide. So didn't really stop Max Verstappen's charge at all. But at the same time, even Lewis Hamilton, when Max Verstappen, during the penultimate lap, when Max Verstappen was in his DRS zone, Lewis Hamilton didn't put up much of a fight. He didn't try to defend aggressively against Max Verstappen, and he just let Max pass pretty easily, in my opinion. And I think I'm of the opinion that Max would have still passed Lewis on the last lap, but I would have liked to see a little more of a fight. I would have liked to see Lewis put up a bit more of a fight against Max than just letting him by on the straight.
Yeah, I mean, both the Mercedes had dead tires, especially the fronts, right? And I mean, looking at the timing screen, you could see that the people troubling Max Verstappen were the back markers. He could not make up time when he was behind traffic, and once he cleared that traffic, he was just flying and overtaking Valtteri and Lewis. So
Absolutely. There was a time, around like the 47th, 48th lap when the 5 second gap between Lewis and Max stabilized, and everybody was like, oh, the gamble didn't pay off, and this was the bad decision. But suddenly Max was lapping a second and a half quicker than Lewis towards the last couple of laps, and it all came to be. But there's also something to talk about regarding the Mercedes strategy. We've seen Mercedes botch up strategy a couple of times in the last couple of races. And once again this weekend, going into the weekend, the teams knew that the undercut was going to be the best strategy option. Obviously, everyone underestimated how powerful exactly the undercut was going to be. But once Valtteri pitted, I don't understand why they waited for Lewis. They waited for Verstappen to respond to Valtteri's pit stop and then brought Lewis in. In my opinion, they should have brought Lewis in the very next lap to cover for Verstappen pitting, but obviously they didn't do that and they lost P1 you have to give it to Max. What an in lap and what an out lap. Not only did he negate Valtteri's undercut that Mercedes tried to pull on him, but he also undercut Lewis Hamilton at the same time. So I think that was a great bit of driving and a great bit of strategy from Red Bull, and you have to give it to them.
yeah, definitely. I mean, the Mercedes strategy did not pay off at all. They didn't pit. They didn't even pit Lewis when Max pitted. They waited another 2 laps because they did not expect that undercut to be that powerful, and that
Which is kind of surprising because once Charles was like the first of everyone to pit, right? Once Charles pitted, and Charles jumped both Carlos and Daniel and Pierre Gasly, I think through that round of pit stops. So I feel like Mercedes would have seen that and they would have known that, okay, the undercut is really powerful even for these midfield teams. So definitely up here, when we're lapping about a second quicker than anyone else, it's essential that we do the undercut. But at the same time, I believe once Red Bull undercut Lewis Hamilton, there is nothing that Lewis or Red Bull could have done to gain the P1 back. Absolutely, and I don't think once even responding to Red Bull pitting for that second pit stop would have helped Lewis, get P1 back. It would have just been a race to the finish on mediums instead.
Christian Horner said after the race that they did not want Mercedes to pull off another Barcelona on them, and that's why they pulled that off, and they turned the table essentially on them and used their
absolutely
trick. So that was brilliant.
That was definitely brilliant. And it also seemed like Mercedes were playing defense against Red Bull, who were trying to attack this weekend. At every time, we saw them leaving Bottas out to play defense for Lewis, and then not putting Lewis before Verstappen. Essentially not responding to that threat at all. So I guess there's a change. Like you said, Mercedes is under pressure, and that might be getting to them and how they're operating in that garage. But anyway, enough about Mercedes. Let's talk about Red Bull now. Again, fabulous weekend. We thought that going to this weekend they might not be the quickest car, but once again Max Verstappen putting in insane 129.9 lap time. Taking 4/10 off of his first Q3 run, and that was exhilarating. To see a time like that on board, super quick. Especially after the flexi wing controversy, we thought Red Bull might lose some performance since they won't have. Be able to use their flexi wings anymore, but none of that has deterred Red Bull from being the team to beat. And even Perez this weekend, oh my god, he was definitely a contender for driver of the day, at least for me. And what a drive from him, making that one-stop work and making up that one crucial place, finishing P3 on the podium. Although Perez's overtake on Bottas was controversial in the end, and Toto was not exactly happy about it. But I think Perez is lucky to hold on to that P3 And people were comparing it to how Verstappen overtook in Bahrain and then gave the position back, but the stewards deciding against it this time.
Yeah, I mean, Perez's overtake was the reason Valtteri Bottas did not pit for the second time, because they were hoping for a 5-second penalty. But even then, Bottas finished more than 5 seconds behind Perez, so that was a waste. But Red Bull, as you said, they are on the top of the game right now. This is the first time Honda has won 3 consecutive races since 1991. And I mean,
that is true.
Honda brought a new power unit here, so they had some extra horses, and that showed on the straights. Red Bull were faster on the straights than Mercedes, and yeah, all in all, a perfect weekend from Red Bull, except that turn one mistake from Max Verstappen.
Yeah, that was kind of an uncharacteristic mistake from Max Verstappen, but like you said, flawless weekend from Red Bull. And on the note of Honda, you mentioned Honda. This is the first time since 1991 that Honda won 3 GPs in a row in F1. But Honda had a great weekend in motorsport in general. Honda won in Formula 1. Honda won in MotoGP with Marc Marquez. I think that is a great feel-good story. Then Honda also won in IndyCar. So it was a great weekend for Honda in general overall. But yeah, let's talk about Mercedes versus Red Bull, right? We mentioned Red Bull extending the lead in the Constructors' Championship and Max Verstappen in the Drivers' Championship. And Sergio Perez playing the very essential role of the support driver. But in the post-race interviews, we saw Nico Rosberg poke fun at Christian Horner and Toto Wolff when he asked Christian Horner that, hey, the rear wing flexi rules have been enforced. When are you going to protest the Mercedes front wing because of how much it flexes? And Toto Wolff, it was all fun and games, but you could see that Toto Wolff was kind of annoyed at Nico Rosberg's comment,
Yeah.
and Christian Horner had a good laugh.
Yeah, Toto did seem betrayed.
Absolutely.
But yeah, good fun.
But going into Austria, what do you think the results from France tell us about how things are going to look in Austria, especially since it's a double-header? And we also have to remember that, these results might have been affected by the fact that, the change in performance might be a little bit because of the rear tire pressures being higher than usual, and that might have affected how the tires panned out during the race and, on different cars. And also the fact that, but the practice data wasn't really useful during the race because the conditions were much cooler during the race compared to the practice since it had rained before. So a lot of unknown variables going into a doubleheader in Austria.
I mean, I still have Red Bull as favorites to come out of both the Austria races at top. They might not win both, but as a collective doubleheader, they might come out.
Yeah, so where do you think, what can Mercedes do? What are the next few tracks, or what can Mercedes do to do some damage limitation, and, how can they claw back points in the championship if they had to?
I mean, all they are doing is damage limitation at the end of the day right now. But they need to, I mean, see, they have been lagging behind. I can't put a word on it, and I can't really pinpoint at what they need to do, but in general they have been lagging behind. They have been behaving and running not like a champion team. They're not running like they just won 7 back-to-back world titles. So I think they need to get that feeling back, that team, that energy which led them to 7 world championships.
Absolutely. And and it was interesting to see Mercedes again make another mistake this race. And ever since the season has started, probably except for Bahrain, they've made a mistake at every race. It's either the drivers or the team or the strategists. There's something that has gone wrong for Mercedes at every weekend. But anyway, that's enough of Mercedes and Red Bull. Let's look down at the midfield. What a disastrous weekend for Ferrari, Obviously, all of the teams did not expect the tires to grain so hard and, for the tire life to become so much shorter. But I think the team that came off worst from the new tire regulations and the conditions and the way the tire behaved during the race was Ferrari, They qualified great. They qualified P5 and P7. Carlos beating Leclerc. But during the race, both of them were nowhere to be seen. And I was kind of surprised that Ferrari didn't try to go for a two-stop strategy once both Carlos and Leclerc, were out of the points. They waited really long for to pit Leclerc for the second stop, and then Carlos. I don't remember if Carlos pitted for the second stop, but they waited really long to pit Leclerc a second time. And I think if they would have pitted Leclerc a second time as soon as he dropped off the points finishing positions, I think Leclerc might have had a chance at a couple points at the end of the race.
Yeah, I mean, they pitted Leclerc at the end not because of strategy, but because of need. I mean, otherwise he would have spun out or something. But yeah, as you said, definitely a worse weekend from Ferrari. This is the first time in this season they haven't scored any points, and coming out of two brilliant weekends in Monaco and Baku. I mean, after Monaco they knew that the performance will go down. Baku was still a surprise with Charles putting it on pole, but yeah, they were kind of expecting to go down, but the race was a disaster from them. They could not get those tires ready.
Yeah, they could not get those tires to work no matter what they did. Hopefully they'll bounce back. It'll be nice to see Charles and Carlos score some points and be in the mix for P3 with McLaren, with McLaren pulling away a lead of 16 points after the weekend in France. Talking about McLaren, finally a decent weekend for Daniel Ricciardo, similar to what he had in Barcelona, although he still got beaten by his teammate Lando Norris. I feel, I hope he has made some progress in the car, but overall a really decent weekend for Daniel Ricciardo, and a great start in the race too. During the start of the race, he overtook his teammate and then maintained that position throughout the race until towards the very end of the race when Lando overtook Daniel, and then they finished P5 and P6. So good points all for McLaren in general. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the perfect weekend for McLaren in a way, because P5 and P6 is the third row, the third fastest team, and that was the best they could have done. Norris obviously is the faster of them right now, so naturally he finished P5 even after falling behind, and Ricciardo could have not done any better than P6 in my opinion, because he's still trying to learn the car and get on top of it. But definitely, as we talked in the preview, the 3 weekends will be crucial for Daniel Ricciardo to get on top of his McLaren and even beat Lando in one of the races. But that Constructors' Championship is getting so hot, because even though Ferrari had the worst weekend this season and McLaren had the best weekend this season, but they are still too close, and it's still
absolutely. And yeah, you gotta give a brilliant drive from Lando Norris. He didn't have the best start, but he preserved his tires and went longer on the mediums. I think he pitted on lap 24 compared to lap 16, 17, and then those extra laps helped him have fresher hard tires and make his way through the field. But talking about Daniel Ricciardo once again, I feel Ricciardo is the only one of the drivers who move teams at the start of the season who hasn't beaten his teammate yet and who isn't up to the pace of the car. Because you look at Seb's been there ever since Monaco happened. He had a great weekend here. We were going to talk about that in a bit. Carlos is up, has been very comfortable with Ferrari ever since he got into that car from the very first race. Fernando is looking super good in the Alpine now since Baku. And then who else?
Perez.
And then Perez is obviously up there. He's already won one race with Red Bull and he finished on the podium even this weekend. Although he wasn't exactly happy with his performance, but nonetheless he's doing enough to keep his seat at Red Bull. So I feel it is high time that Daniel Ricciardo gets going in that car. We know from previous years, even at Renault, when he moved to Renault, he took an entire year to get acquainted with the car, and when he came back the next year, he was the driver to beat. But I don't think the way the championship is panning out this year that he can take a whole year to get to grips with the car. It has to be done now, and it has to be done like right now. But yeah, can't wait for this Ferrari versus McLaren rivalry to heat up this season. Now let's look a bit further down the grid. AlphaTauri, again, really good weekend for Gasly. Tsunoda having again a disastrous weekend. Quali crash was really strange, really uncharacteristic the way he went off, and then not really capitalizing in the race. Although he did make up a lot of places at the start, but couldn't capitalize on it and couldn't keep his tires alive.
I mean, Tsunoda made up the places he had to made up. He had to make up because he was behind the Williams and the Haases. So that's about it, I believe. But yeah, brilliant performance from Pierre Gasly as usual.
Yep, absolutely. I think, but at the same time, you look at Pierre and you're like, where does this man belong? Because, not to get into a whole lot of silly season talk here, but all the other teams, that are ahead of AlphaTauri already have two drivers going to the next season. There are no seats available in any of these teams up there. So where does Pierre Gasly belong? Because if Red Bull doesn't see a future for Pierre Gasly at the Red Bull, at the senior team, there is no point of having Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri team for any longer, especially since the Red Bull Juniors and F2 have been doing really well. Liam Lawson has been on the top of his game. He won on his F2 debut, and he won on his DTM debut, and even Jehan Daruwala has been picking up some points. So it's going to be really interesting where Pierre Gasly ends up at the end of this year.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if Red Bull does keep hold of him, they might just keep him at AlphaTauri because he provides a good benchmark for the younger Red Bull drivers like Tsunoda and like anyone who will join AlphaTauri in the coming seasons. So that's one thing. But I mean, Franz Tost would want to keep hold of Pierre Gasly even if Red Bull, leaves him to be. So
yeah, but again, we need to remind ourselves that the AlphaTauri team exists because, there has been talk that AlphaTauri is not a junior team anymore, it's a sister team, but at the very core of it, it is a team for Red Bull juniors to step into Formula One and then, graduate to the senior team. So, as much as Pierre Gasly has been doing great, if there's not a future for him at Red Bull, I don't see him being with AlphaTauri for a whole lot longer. But anyway, that's some talk for silly season, once we get through halfway through the season. But moving forward, Aston Martin once again executing that strategy of going long and deep into the race, and then making up places towards the end of the race on fresher tires. However, kind of disappointing from in my opinion, I felt that Aston Martin waited a little too long to pit both Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel. I think they could have pitted them a few laps earlier and put them on fresher tires, because Seb was not able to make up places towards the end of the race on fresher tires. He only made up a couple of places to finish 9th. And similarly with Lance Stroll, it just didn't seem like they had pace on whatever tires they were on after the first round of pit stops for them. And I was of the opinion that they should have pitted both of them a little bit earlier to give them a little more time to make up a few more points, because when Max pitted, I was of the opinion that if Vettel pitted at that point, he could have essentially finished P6, P7, somewhere around Lando Norris, basically, on fresher tires. But that did not happen, unfortunately.
yeah, you're right. I mean, both of them pitted after Max Verstappen made his second stop. That was kind of strange, and going that long into the race with that first stop, because it's not just pitting late and using that first stint to its maximum. You have to make up places in the second stint, and if they don't have time to make up places in the second stint, it's no use. So I think that you're right. It could have been a much better result for them.
Absolutely. So kind of disappointed there, but regardless, both of the drivers did come home in the points. So, you still have to give it to them for driving a good race. Talking about driving a good race, Fernando Alonso for Alpine. What a race! He was having trouble on the mediums when he started the race, and he had to pit quite a bit early. But he made those hards work really hard, and he maintained those hards. He maintained his position and finished well. And at the same time, you could see Esteban Ocon, who started on the hards. Esteban Ocon struggled to keep the hearts alive throughout his first stint. But Fernando Alonso made those hearts work really well to finish. I think P7 it was at the end of the race, and after 7 races, it seems like Esteban Ocon might be in some trouble, especially after signing that 3-year contract and finishing so badly at the very next weekend. So not really great for Esteban, but hopefully he'll bounce back at Austria.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely not the best home race for Esteban Ocon. But Fernando Alonso, as you said, he is coming back. That we are talking about the comeback and people getting used to the cars. Daniel Ricciardo is still struggling, but Fernando Alonso is slowly getting back into that groove. He has had now 2 brilliant weekends in Baku and in France now, and another 2 races in Austria, which are, as we discussed earlier, normal tracks. So that might help him get good with the car sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. Fernando has definitely been on fire the past couple of weekends. But we just hope that Fernando, if he continues to keep driving like this, I'm pretty sure the Fernando bandwagon will be back on, and no one will accuse him of taking up a place of a young driver at the Alpine team, because a lot of people were disappointed that Guan Yu Zhou or Christian Lundgaard weren't included in the team or considered for the Alpine team since they had done well in F2 last year. But not much to talk about for Alfa Romeo. They just lagged pace the entire weekend. So not much there. Giovinazzi did put it in Q2 maybe, as far as I remember.
Q2.
But again, nothing much from him. Similarly with Williams, not the best race, although Russell did finish P12 and said it was his best race with Williams so far. So again, something there. But talking about Haas, first Q2 for the Haas team this year, even though it came under unusual circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, Mick is definitely learning some tips from his Ferrari stable senior, Charles Leclerc.
And don't forget Seb Vettel.
Yeah, get a good lap in quali and then crash. You are into the next round.
Absolutely.
But jokes apart, it was definitely a good lap from Mick. He would have Lance Stroll would have bettered that lap and pushed Mick back into back into the elimination zone. But regardless, a good lap from Mick Schumacher.
Yeah, but it kind of worries me because Mick's had a couple crashes in the last few races, and Nikita had a crash at the beginning of the season. It just worries me, how Haas will be managing their development work alongside so much, so much damage, because there is a budget cap this season, right? And that is what I'm trying to refer to. And they will have to pay for all these damages. So it just kind of worries me whether it'll eat into their budget for next year's development. But we'll see what happens.
That is the only reason why they are not developing the car this season. So they have that contingency planned, in my opinion.
Yep, absolutely. But nothing else from me regarding the French GP. Anything from you, Vedant?
Yeah, I mean, we have Austria coming up. So 2 weekends, another 2 back-to-back weekends of racing at a brilliant track. And Austria as a circuit has grown on me, especially last year when we raced there twice. So really looking forward for those 2 races now.
Definitely looking forward to some Scenario 7 once again and getting some Lando
Last
content.
lap Lando.
We did get some McLaren content this week too, with Dan Ricciardo's race engineer calling him Darren, who's a strategist back at the base, just like he called Carlos Darren a few times when Carlos was at McLaren. That was something that people picked up on. But nothing else from my side. But I will take a couple predictions for you for Austria before we close this podcast.
All right. So I think Max Verstappen will definitely win a race. That's one. In my opinion, that's a given. I think we might have an outsider on the podium, and the prime contender is obviously Lando. But I'm leaving it a little vague so that I can get that tick mark, get that check. But yeah, and as I said earlier in the podcast, Red Bull will come out on top of Mercedes after this weekend. After the 2 weekends. Yeah.
Alright, so I'm going to go a bit bolder and I'm going to say Sergio Perez might get his second win with Red Bull on an alternate tire strategy like Albon was on when he was about to win a year ago.
Interesting.
So, we might have a second Sergio Perez win, and I'm going to go ahead and say that we're going to see Lando Norris on the podium twice.
Oh.
So those are my predictions. But yeah, that's all from our side for this week. And thank you, Vedant, for joining me once again. And we'll catch you all on the next one.